Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm your host, Dr. Haider Shah. On behalf of Colvas, I would like to welcome all of you to this webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. Today we have another very interesting topic, and I'm really honored to welcome and introduce our distinguished guest speaker who is going to talk about neuroscience for leaders, practical insights to successfully lead people and organizations. Neuroscience is the study of how the nervous system develops, its structure and focus on the brain and its impact on behavior and cognitive functions. By acknowledging the importance of neuroscience in leadership, you can accelerate your chances for future success. So, how these things are connected and works, you will get the best insights, right information, knowledge, and guidance about all these things as we have a renowned professor and expert with us in today's this session. So stay tuned because an amazing stuff are coming ahead in this session. So before we start, I would like to thank Kalwas for arranging such enlightenment sessions for their support and providing us such a wonderful platform. The aim of Colvas is to give you the opportunity to connect and interact with world renowned speakers, academic leaders, teachers, authors, researchers, experts, professionals, and businessmen to share their views, experiences, and tips which will create an impact and will enable you to learn new things and develop yourself in order to grow and transform individually, as well as to contribute to the world in a positive way. As our slogan is come, learn, and share knowledge. So today we have very special and distinguished guest speaker. He is well-known personality in academia and industry, having a wonderful experience and exposure, working and associated with the businesses, brand companies, many world-renowned organizations, and served them on multiple fronts. We always see him while contributing to the world and field through his keynotes, coaching, consulting, and research work. Moreover, through his great knowledge and wisdom, people are getting the right guidance and knowledge. Above everything, he always extends the helping hand and popular for sharing his knowledge. So let me introduce him formally. He is an award-winning communications professional, book author, educator, and consultant. He spoke at TEDx for the urgent need for brain-based communication, and he contributed to the Neuro Marketing Manager program at Hamburg Media School. He has scanned more than 7,500 brains from 25 countries globally for neuro marketing, neuro HR, and academic purposes. Moreover, he worked with the international brands such as IKEA, IBM, GTI, Nestle, Johnson and Johnson, AstraZeneca, the Kisco, SAP, Coca-Cola, T-Mobile, Dell, USAID, and many more. He is the head of Neuro Consulting Service at Optimal HR Group, Athens, Greece, offering cutting edge neuro marketing and neuro HR research and consulting. He has received his PhD and MBA from the University of Sheffield, UK, and he is certified neuro marketer. In addition to that, he teaches regularly in various MBAs and other university and corporate programs around the world. He is the chairman of the People Committee at the World Innovation and Change Management Institute in Geneva, Switzerland. He is a professor of practice at the University of York campus, York European campus, Greece, where he leads the MSc in neuromarketing. He is the co-founder of Neurogenesis, the Applied Neuroscience Club of Greece. He is also a visiting professor at the School of Economics and Business of the University of Ljubljana. Lately, he is the head launched Wellbeing, Belgium-based pioneering startup in the field of emotional and mental health tech at work. Moreover, he received the Greek Excellence Award 2022 from the Hellenic Institute for Customer Services. Last but not the least, he is a wonderful speaker, author, teacher, professional, a multi-talented person with a great dynamic personality. Above everything, a great human being. So please help me in welcoming our guest, Dr. Nikolaos Dimitriadis. Welcome to the Calvas platform, and thank you very much for joining us, Prof.
Thank you so much for having me. We have been planning this for some time now, but my very chaotic schedule and crazy schedule didn't allow us to do it faster. But all good things come to those who wait, for both of us and for our listeners. And I'm so happy that we are here to thank you so much for having me. And I hope that we will all have a wonderful time.
Thank you so much, and we really appreciate, and it's pleasure to have you, Prof. We had been planning such a long time, and finally you are with us, and you are sharing your wonderful knowledge with us. We can't wait to listen to you, Prof. As a gentle reminder to the audience that Prof will be presenting, and he would leave time for question answer session at the end of the session. You can write in comment section, or you can email us at info@kalwas.com. So over to you, Prof. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much again for having me. Now, I have prepared some slides that I would like to share with your audience, but not immediately. I think I don't know. Maybe it's the time of the year. Maybe it is the fact that we are half the way across the world between us. I would like very much to share some stories before we see some more formal things online. And actually, if we engage in a conversation which is more lively and more interesting even before, I would much more prefer this. So why am I into neuroscience? What happened that made me really fascinated with the world of brain, and especially structure and function of the brain, and especially the application of knowledge coming from neuroscience into the world of business and education. I will share a short personal story, something that happened a few years ago, and really shook my personal understanding of the world. So it was more than 25 years ago where I had a car accident. And what happened is that while I was driving my car in my hometown in Greece, something attracted and took my attention away from the road. And all of a sudden, I realized that with my peripheral vision, that there was an obstacle in front on the road. There was an obstacle that actually was unavoidable. I didn't have the chance to, at the time, to steer my car away from the obstacle and avoid the collision. So this happened in extremely fast time, in milliseconds. So while I was driving my car, something attracted my attention. I realized that there is an obstacle in the middle of the street, something that I actually I would have a collision, and I have no time to respond effectively and avoid this collision. Now, what is very interesting is that this realization, as I said, was in milliseconds, and I did not experience the crash. I'm very sorry to give me just a second. I will share my screen so that Okay, sorry for this. So what actually happened is that uh, I was switched off as a conscious human being. I did not experience the collusion, and few seconds, minutes, I have actually zero perception of how much time passed. I came back online to realize that the hit already happened, the collision already happened, the accident, if you want, already happened. So I had my conscious experience on just few seconds before the collision. I switched off just before the hit, and I came back online. I, I have no conscious of how much time it took me right after the collision. And when I woke up, when I came back online, I looked around, I realized that my car already hit the car in front. And I looked at the person next to me. The good thing and the good news is that I was not speeding up, so not real damage happened. None of us had a really strong impact or strong injury, but still, I went through the days rethinking and evaluating the experience, and a very specific question remained. Who switched me off? and who switched me back on? And this is a question I couldn't respond. I didn't have the answer because it was not me that decided, hey, Nico, the accident is about to happen. Let me put you to sleep. And then it was not me saying, okay, the experience has finished, the danger has passed, so please come back on. I had zero decision-making power, and I had zero awareness of all these processes of my brain that switched me off and on back again. So searching, and this we are talking about 1997 now. So and coming out of business studies, I finished my bachelor's and my MBA back then, and I came back um, to the university to start my PhD after this experience, which I almost completely devoted in the brain processes and the mental processes that happen behind our consciousness and actually direct a lot of our lives. Now, of course, you can imagine that since I came back in consciousness, in my conscious experience, and I did not consciously switch on and switch off my life, the actual second question that came was, okay, if I'm not the one switching on and switching off, if I'm not the one really controlling all the situation, who is it? This was the big question. Searching the literature, getting into hardcore neuroscientific research, I realized that there are very important processes happening in our brain in what we call the unconscious that not only perceive reality before we perceive reality with our conscious mind and the picture that we have as a felt experience every day in our heads. So there are processes that receive information from the external world, analyze it, give value to it. Is it danger? Is it something good? Is it irrelevant? Is it relevant? There are these processes, and they decide for us, and then we come as a part of all these wonderful processes of the brain to play our role. I don't want to say that conscious part of the brain doesn't play any role, but it doesn't play the strategic or the holistic role that we thought before it plays. And, searching more and more the literature and getting deeper into neuroscience, I found some fascinating stuff. So, first of all, my experience is not unique. There is a lot of literature on the subject of switching on, going off, switching off the lights of consciousness and switching them back on when we are about to experience a very difficult situation, like a car crash. So it's a quite often and a very well documented phenomenon in neuroscience, where the parts of the brain of the unconscious that want to ensure our survival can decide that an experience that is coming has the potential to be so traumatic that it's better not to experience it in order to avoid the absolute panic and terror that can accompany this traumatic experience, and thus to have more clarity of mind in order to take the steps and minimize, if you want, the effects of this traumatic experience. So the fact that my brain decided to switch me off and switch me on, many other people in other traumatic experiences, they have an effect of feeling that this traumatic experience is not actually happening to them. Maybe even the experience of what is called out-of-body experience, like you see yourself from the outside. All these are strategies of our unconscious to ensure survival. And sometimes we consciously experiencing the event is not the best for our survival. So the brain decides very cleverly, very intelligibly, to switch us off in order for us to come on in later stages after the event took place, in order to help the total system, us as an organism, to survive. So it's not something unique, or it's not something, let's say, something that science doesn't know about. Now, searching more and more, I discovered something that the father of modern psychology, William James, the very famous scientist and philosopher that in the end of the 19th century established the first psychology department in a university in the US. So William James established in Harvard the very first psychology department as a science. Because psychology was not a science before, it was more into philosophy. So a philosopher was kind also of the person that asks these very big questions about human nature, how we make decisions, and how to live our lives. So this was before philosophy, but at some point, philosophy became psychology. So William James asked a fascinating question. He asked, are you afraid because you are running, or are you running because you are afraid? This is really counterintuitive question. It's a very surprising question. What do you mean, am I running because I'm afraid? Which it seems to be the normal way of living, or am I afraid because I'm running? So what comes first and what comes second? Living every day our lives, it seems to us, it's a phenomenon, it seems to my conscious mind that there is a top-down process of what is happening to what I do as a response. So to my personal felt experience in my everyday life, it seems like there is a top-down process where the top is my conscious perception of what's happening in the world. Let's say I walk through a forest and there is some strange noise or a shadow somewhere in the forest. I have to perceive this. I have, first of all, to notice it, to perceive it, to analyze it, to give it value, to see if it is a good or a bad phenomenon. And then when I make my decision based on the data that I perceive, I go to the next step of the process, which is to induce, to start a behavior that will deal with this situation in the best possible way. So from the one hand, I perceive the world, I analyze the world, and I respond to the world. And it looks like that. But William James had a very strong intuition, or if you want, his own perception of the world, that said that that's not the case. Although it looks this very clear top-down within my awareness radar that this is the process, I see the danger, I see the data, I analyze it as danger, and I respond to the danger. Actually, this is not the case. How actually neuroscience sees the situation is quite different. Neuroscience says that this process exists, but in the unconscious, not in the conscious. What do I mean? When I walk in a forest and there is a strange noise or a shadow, a movement somewhere in my periphery of my visual field, then the brain receives this information much faster than when it appears in my conscious mind. So my unconscious receives this data much faster than I'm aware of this data. And this data, if, for example, it's a visual cue, so it's, for example, shadow or a movement, a strange movement of the tree or of a bush, then this comes not to my consciousness, but to a part of the brain called the thalamus, is in the center of our limbic system, in the center of the brain, which receives 98% of my perceptual information, and its role is to analyze, so it has its own analytics and its own way of categorizing and evaluating data that come from my senses, in order for the thalamus to see if this is a dangerous or a wonderful situation or a relevant or irrelevant. Now, and all this happens in an unconscious level. So the thalamus will decide if this is a potentially life-threatening situation, and if the thalamus decides this, all this in the unconscious, still Nikos, myself, has not seen or heard consciously nothing. So still everything happens in the unconscious in milliseconds, okay? So the unconscious, and especially the thalamus, if the thalamus detects danger, will immediately send information to my amygdala. Okay, we have two amygdala, actually. It's the threat center of our brain. The amygdala is a key part of the threat management system that our brain has. It's not the only one, but it plays a central role. So the thalamus in the center of the brain will activate the amygdala, and the amygdala will start activating a cascading series of events in my body in order for me to deal with this potential danger that thalamus decided is a danger. So amygdala will start getting excited, then adrenaline will be produced in my body. Both my muscle and my skeleton, through what is called the sympathetic nervous system, which is autonomous. We don't control it. The sympathetic nervous system will activate, which means I will start getting ready for fight or flight. I will start getting sweat on my skin, which we measure with the devices I have in my lab, in order to recognize if there is, because sweat has a cooling effect when my muscles get overheated. So if I start sweating, it means that my body expects muscle overheat, which means I need to continue either running or fighting. So it's a fantastic system to help me survive. The way that the visual information comes in, even the part of the brain that controls behavior, action, will be activated in order to run towards a specific direction. So all these things are happening before my consciousness comes in to say, hey, there is a danger, there is a potential threat, let me run. So and then, of course, this part of the brain that activates the motor part of my brain that will activate all these fine changes that have to happen in my body in order to start running towards a situation. This will also happen. And then I will turn and even start running in milliseconds. After all this, consciousness will come in and say, what is happening? Probably in order for all these things to have been activated, obviously I'm afraid and I'm running. So if you go back to the question of William James, that whenever I ask this question, and I ask it to my students, to my colleagues, to business clients, to my audiences, do you run because you are afraid, or you are afraid because you are running? They get shocked in the beginning. But then when I explain the whole process, it starts to make sense. Because, if the brain expected consciousness to be aware of all this, in order for consciousness to take the decision and to give the go for all this, we will all be dead. Because consciousness is a phenomenon that happens too late and it's too limited. So if, as a human species, our survival depended on consciousness to receive all this information, analyze it, and provide action, exist as a species. Now, there is more things to unpack here. First of all, what William James asked, am I running because I'm afraid, or am I afraid because I'm running? And of course, the right answer in neuroscience is first you run, means all these changes happen to your system, and then the conscious experience of fear appears. That is one very important topic, which is, I would say, one of the most difficult to discuss with people, and even scientifically to study, because there are many opinions and actually a full-fledged war in academia at this moment on this topic. And the topic is the following: is feeling and emotion, are these two phenomena the same? Because in our everyday language, we use feeling and emotion interchangeably, as if we refer to the same thing, the same phenomenon. So sometimes I say, I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling fear, or I'm full with emotions now, I'm surprised, but also happy. And you will recognize that there is a strong part in neuroscience, not only in neuroscience, and also very close sciences, of people, including myself, that emotion and feeling is not the same phenomenon. Emotion is what happens mostly in the unconscious through the whole process of my unconscious receiving the information, analyzing it, and causing an action point, while feeling is my conscious experience of all these changes that happened in our body. And these two are not the same thing. And there is a wonderful research that shows that sometimes the unconscious has activated a specific emotional system, but the conscious mind is a little bit in an illusion that maybe another one has been activated, because these two systems are not the same and they do not do the same thing. So in neuroscience, when we talk about emotions, and the word in English is fantastic, emotion. So we are talking about systems of the brain, very, very fundamental, hardwired systems that deal with various possible stimuli from the outside world and different types of decision making, or first of all, crunching of data and then decision making, in order for us to engage in behaviors that best address the challenge of a situation. Feeling is something that comes later in the system, and many times accurately represents what happens in the brain, sometimes not. This is now, you see, now it becomes much more clear what William James asked. Not only are you running because you are afraid, or are you afraid because you're running? Yes, you are afraid because you're running consciously, but unconsciously, the basic fundamental fear network in our unconscious has been engaged in order for me to run. Okay, and this is a first step for somebody that enters into what we call applied neuroscience. We have to at one level, separate the different phenomena that happened in our brain and in our body. But of course, then we have to reintegrate them in order to have a more holistic approach. Now, going back to why all this information stays in the unconscious, and why doesn't it appear directly in the conscious? Why does the brain does this escalation or processing, if you want, first in the unconscious and then in the conscious? Why not directly in the conscious mind? Many people ask me this, and the response is very clear. You know, our brain receives 11 million bits of information from our senses every second. 11 million bits of information every single second. How much of this appears in the conscious mind? So what is the bandwidth? What is the informational processing capacity of our conscious mind? It's only 50 to 60, not 1,000 bits per second, with a possible limit, if you want, ceiling of 120 bits per second. So imagine from 11 million that the brain receives every second from my senses to recognize what's happening out there, the ability of my conscious processor, like the RAM on your laptop, you know, the random access memory, which is what we call working memory. So working memory has a very short capacity to process information. And then many people ask me, can we expand it? No, this is, of course, you can help it to work more efficiently or less efficiently, but it's set by evolution. It's not something that human beings can change. Now, I don't know if Elon Musk, with his Neuralink chip that he wants to put in our brain, maybe can expand this, but it's a matter of biology, not of wishful thinking. So actually, if you think that only 50 to 60 bits is the capacity of my conscious mind to process information, what would happen if all of a sudden 11 million came in? The system would collapse. So actually, nature has found an amazing way to keep us alive without damaging the system. Because what would happen would, in this 50-60, would get overheated, would get overloaded, as many times it happens in our everyday life, right? You have too many things on your mind and you start forgetting things, you cannot focus. Multitasking is another phenomenon that creates this limited capacity of conscious analytics we have to crash. So many bad things happen if we don't manage the system efficiently as the brain wants it to be managed. Burnout, you've heard of burnout, right? That globally, the World Health Organization has finally recognized burnout as a symptom that happens at work. The same with anxiety and depression. Why? Because people are asked to perform so many things, understand so many things. The business environment is more complex than ever. It is more demanding than ever. We just came out from an unprecedented situation with COVID and lockdowns, and probably we will be asked to deal with many such crises. We have now the war in Ukraine, so we will have many challenges which are very demanding for our brain power, and unfortunately, not knowing how to manage this situation better, we get into problems such as burnout. The same happens with my story with my car accident in the beginning. The fact that my unconscious decided to switch off my conscious mind is because my conscious mind is very limited in processing. So and probably it would mess up the situation instead of helping it. So my unconscious said, hey, you have this 50, 60, 120 bits of analysis per second. Actually, in this moment, it will probably get panicked, it will get completely overheated because of the accident, so better to switch it off and then I switch it on later on. Other examples of this, when you sleep, your unconscious works. How do you know that your unconscious works? Because if there is a strange sound in the house, you will wake up. Who woke you up? You were sleeping. Your consciousness was off. But all of a sudden you say, hey, I heard something. This is again the thalamus receiving the information from the outside world, okay, with all this information that it's still active and processing, and the thalamus decided that that's a strange sound, you need to wake up to respond, and it wakes you up. Now, there is some other also processes in the unconscious that fascinated me to devote my life in studying the human brain and helping companies take better decisions, both internally, what we call Neuro HR, and externally, what we call Neuro marketing. In the beginning of 1980s, I would say completely fascinating experiment happened, which revolutionized our approach to human nature and decision making. A neuroscientist called Benjamin Libet, did an experiment which changed completely our view of human beings. It's a very famous experiment. I would say it's one of the most, if not the most, famous experiment in neuroscience. So Benjamin Libet took some subject in his lab. He put a clock in front of them with just one arm. So just one arm was going around the clock. Every second, it was moving every second. And he asked his subjects, decide when we would like to do, for example, you have your arm stretched in front of you, you can move it up or down. And you can take this decision of moving it up or down whenever you want. Just whenever you make this decision, make sure that the clock, which time was actually, which second in a minute the arm was showing, so you can tell me, hey, I took the decision that now we do this, of course, more digitally. You have a laptop and you press one side of the laptop or the other button So you on the keyboard, so it's a little bit more technical. But before was move your wrist up or down. And here the subjects had an electroencephalogram. So they were doing this multiple times. They were moving it up, down, only up, only down, etc. When you do this multiple times, then we have a kind of two data points. One is when people said that they decided to move, so conscious decision making, and we have, because of the electroencephalogram, we have the unconscious decision making point. And Benjamin Libet came out of his experiment and he said, I'm paraphrasing, I killed free will, because what I found is, what Libet found was that the brain was building up the decision up to 2.5 seconds before people were consciously thinking that they decided, and then they said, okay, so if I saw the arm of the clock when I thought of decided there, then I said, okay, it was on the 30 seconds mark. So he came out of the experiment and he said, that's it. I thought that we decide consciously, but actually the brain builds up the decision up to 2.5 seconds before somebody said, okay, I decided on the 30th mark. And then many people started to try to recreate this experiment. Hundreds, if not thousands of times, his experiment has been duplicated with success. The last one, which was announced in 2019, took back the decision-making of the brain to 11 seconds. 11 seconds before somebody said, okay, I decided to press A or B. Something is happening, and not only, and this is very, very interesting, not only Benjamin Libet found out that the brain is building the decision, is taking actually the decision up to 2.5 seconds before we decide, but which decision? To go up or to go down? To press A or to press B? So not only we can read the brain processes that create the decision, we can predict the decision you are making. And when you are exposed to this kind of research, automatically your brain runs is overflown with ideas of where to apply it. And the first step that companies took this research and applied it to solve business problems was marketing. So neuromarketing, end of 90s and especially beginning of 2000, was the first business department, if you want, function, that tried to take all this wonderful research, methods, theory, technology, and applied it to understand and take better investment decisions. Marketing is usually the most innovative corporate department, and it makes sense. Why? Because marketing is under constant stress to get new clients. And if you want to see what HR departments will do in 5 years, look at what marketing is doing today. Now, this is a small parenthesis, but marketing was talking about customer satisfaction. Then HR was talking about employee satisfaction. Marketing was talking about customer loyalty. Now we're talking about employee loyalty. Marketing was talking about customer experience. Now we talk about employee experience. Marketing took social media immediately to use in marketing. Now HR is using internal social media to motivate employees, etc., etc., etc. So when marketing applied neuroscience in reading brain reactions to marketing material, advertisements, and many others, now HR is using to study the internal brain, because marketing is studying the external brain, the customer brain. Now HR is studying the internal brain, the employee brain. And very early in my career, as I said, after my accident experience in 1997, I start focusing almost completely in psychology. And around in 2004 and 2005, I did the switch. I make my transition from psychology to neuroscience. Now, psychology and neuroscience are not the same sciences. They're different sciences. Of course, they share many things and they collaborate, but they're not the same. Since 2005, I have devoted completely myself in applying neuroscience to business. I have my own lab. I created the very first MSc Neuromarketing in Southeast Europe. I created in Greece the first neuroscience non-profit for the promotion of applied neuroscience ideas in business, education, media, the health industry, etc., in the arts, etc., etc. And as you mentioned, now we have measured more than 8,000 brains from 25 countries in order to help companies understand deeper what's happening in the brain, not what I feel. This comes later. What my brain experiences as a deep-rooted emotion, and what does this mean for decisions I have to take in my company with the brands that I work for. So I have been applying mainly neuroscience to marketing. So we help companies all around the world understand brain reactions to things like advertisements, but not only. It could be a total analysis of an app, the total brain experience of the app. Because when we talk about employee or customer experience, you know, if you go through an experience, I'm giving you a new app, a new website, and I'm saying, okay, this is the customer journey you need to follow in order then to research if it is good or not. Traditionally, I had to go through the whole experience, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. And when the experience finished, you would come and say, okay, Nikos, now tell me what you liked, what you didn't like. There is an obvious problem. There are two problems. The first problem, it's not real time. I finished my experience, and then you ask me to come after the experience to use my memory to go back and report what happened. That's an obvious problem. It's not real time. It already happened for my brain. The second problem is what we have been discussing since the beginning of our session. The fact that my conscious brain, the bandwidth, the capacity is just 50 to 60 bits of information. And of course, it's losing a lot of the important input that the brain itself is receiving to direct a behavior. Not me, it's not top down. Nikos, and I'll tell you something rather funny. I'm sure that many of our friends that are watching this, either live or afterwards, they will say, Nikos, I can prove you that you are wrong. It's very easy to prove you that I take decisions top down consciously and not unconsciously. Observe. I want to prove Nikos wrong by raising my hand. Did I raise my hand? Yes. Did I decide consciously? No. You just read out the decision. Deeper parts of your brain, very unsatisfied from what I'm talking, decided to prove me wrong. Already the brain went through many options of how to prove me wrong. Already the decision is taken how you will prove me wrong. Already the unconscious sent the signals to your muscles and nerves. Which hand are you going to raise? Your left or your right? Already the signals went to the part of the brain that controls this hand. You already gave this, and then later you came online and said, I'm raising my hand, Nikos. So we are kind of representing the brain rather than controlling the brain. And then the question comes very, very easily, very normal and very logically, is my logic of saying if I'm going to raise this hand or that hand, is this, since it is not being taken by me, but is taken by my unconscious, am I a good representative of my brain? Okay, let's decide. And it is quite mainstream in science. It's not even very extreme that the unconscious does all these processes, takes the decisions, at least the direction of the decision, gives the orders, and we are just reading out the press release, if you want, of what happened in my brain. Is this press release accurate? And this is the next big shocking thing about what neuroscience has discovered. So not only I'm not the one that takes the decisions and directs action, I'm not even the most accurate or the most informed part of the brain to report about this. Because maybe the brain has its own protocols, its own processes, its own agendas in order to analyze the data, evaluate the data, and based on the data and this evaluation of the data, to promote a specific behavior. And all this information is so complex and so high in volume that the brain not always has its own interest to tell me what exactly happened in order for me to stand in front of you and our wonderful audience and explain what happened. Actually, in science, this is called self-reporting. What is self-reporting? Why we call it self-reporting? Because you ask myself, the sense of self that I have in my mind, to report, to give you ideas, how I felt, maybe even my intentions, what am I going to do? Think, feel, do. I'm able to report of what I think, what I feel, and maybe what I will do, my intentions. And traditional research was taking this self-reporting data to develop theories, to predict behavior, and make investments. We now understand that self-reporting is, I don't want to be completely provocative and say it's not at all predictive of behavior, but it's the least predictive of behavior. So asking me about myself at this moment is considered a methodological weakness in science. So if you do a study and you collected maybe some fMRI data or EEG data or other objective data, the subjective data you report through this self-reporting, regardless if it is a questionnaire or an interview, what traditionally we called quantitative, qualitative. Now, that's not different. We used to be so obsessed. Do you have quantitative data or qualitative? It's the same kind of data. Both of them self-reporting. Regardless if I have to put on a Likert scale from 1 to 10, if you interview me for an hour, or if I put smileys on a website. In all these three situations, Nikos' sense of conscious self is reporting for himself. The problem is that in all comparative studies concerning what predicts human behavior more, Nikos' understanding of himself, unconscious data, or other behavioral data. Self-reporting data are the weakest. And this is a big now issue within companies, within science, etc. So we need to go beyond what Nikos says. And Nikos is not trying to fool anybody. He's even not trying to lie. He really believes in what he says. And maybe this is the last scientific theory I will mention, and then we can take some questions. For more than 20 years, Michael Gazzaniga, he's a cognitive neuroscientist. Actually, he gave to cognitive neuroscience the name cognitive neuroscience. Okay. Together with Joseph Ledoux. Joseph Ledoux, many people in neuroscience know him because he's one of the top experts in the threat management system of the brain. So amygdala, fear, anxiety, and all these kind of things. They did more than 20 years research on split brain patients. Who are split brain patients? You have heard that the cortex of our brain is separated into two. We have the left and the right hemisphere, okay? The cerebrum actually is separated into two. And there is a part that connects them. It's called corpus callosum. It's the fibers that connects the left and the right, and they allow the two to communicate or not to communicate. Sometimes they block. Sometimes they allow communication. Okay, but many years ago, there was a surgical procedure for people with epilepsy to cut, to sever the of course, it's very brutal, it's not accepted now, to sever the connection between the two hemispheres in order for the epileptic storm from one half of the brain not to pass to the other half of the brain. So they were trying to protect patients, to localize the epileptic crisis and not to pass to the whole brain and be very risky for their own health, to be very threatening their own life. So what Michael Gazzaniga and Joseph Ledoux found out is that when only half of the brain was receiving external information, because that we have an X way that the halves of the brain receive information. So my left hemisphere receives information from my right eye, mostly, and controls the right part of the brain, and the opposite. My right hemisphere is receiving the information from the left part and controls the left part of the brain. We are not sure why nature decided this. It could be serial. It's not serial, it's an X. Anyhow, depending on which eye I block or which eye I release, I can control in split brain patients which half receives the information and which half does not. What they found out is that because language exists on the left hemisphere, not on the right. Maybe some people heard of Broca's area or Wernicke's area. There's different part of the brain, left hemisphere, that receives language and analyzes, and another one, Broca's area, that produces language. But these are on the left hemisphere. So when the left hemisphere did not know about the information that was shown on the right hemisphere, and then it had to explain why somebody did something, then the left hemisphere is developing theories without knowing reality. So, for example, in a person that has this split brain surgery, you show them only to the left eye that goes to my right hemisphere, you show them toilet, and they stand up to go to toilet. And then you ask, why do you go to toilet? Now, the left hemisphere did not see toilet, so it doesn't know. It says, well, I was thirsty and I'm going to get a drink, which is not why the right hemisphere did this. And the left hemisphere believes it, and it's true. So actually, and these are multiple such tests, not one. Gazzaniga and Ledoux developed this theory of the interpreter. There is a specific part of our brain in the left hemisphere that it is responsible to create stories and to create justifications of why we behave in a specific way, without necessarily the total brain to have that exact reason why it behaved in a specific way. So behavior and reporting on a behavior are not the same parts of the brain. They are different parts. And unfortunately, as a society, as business, we have been heavily depending on what we say, which could be just the interpreter trying to convince itself and us about something that actually has no relationship from what the brain actually decided. And this is why neuroscience is a revolution. It's not just another science. As astronomy helped us understand that the sun around the earth, although it looks like that, right? If I look up in the sky, it looks like the sun comes up and goes down, and I'm not moving. The sun is moving. So as astronomy helped us understand that the phenomenon is not what happens in reality, the same neuroscience is changing our confidence that the phenomenon of decision-making and how we live our life in our conscious mind is actually what happens in the brain. It's not. Neuroscience is opening doors and processes in the brain that, frankly speaking, I'm not sure as humanity we are ready to listen. Thank you very much for having me. These are the things that had in mind. I think it's much better I didn't use the slides because I hope that this was more informal and personal and engaging than showing you slides. And I really hope that people found it interesting, intriguing. Maybe they agreed with some things, maybe they disagreed with some others, but I hope that everybody found something as a takeaway from our session.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Prof. For really superb explanation. The way you started from your own personal experience, and you talked about that accident and how actually it changed your life and the perception and taking so much new decisions and all these things. What a nicely you have connected, and then you talked about the neuroscience, how it developed, what is the role of the subconscious, the conscious, and what is the gist of it. Everything was so connected, and Prof, you could see that I was highly engaged what you were saying, because I didn't want to waste 1 second, because you were connecting the different dots in a wonderful way, and everything was so connected. Prof, can you believe it? We received a lot of wonderful questions regarding the different things you talked about, and you covered so many things in that. And one of the question was about the traditional research, the attitudinal research, which you talked about very well. That how do you see the mixed method, the quantitative and qualitative, and very nicely you have covered it. Prof, we have received one question, and they said that one email in which they mentioned that Prof had already given a wonderful one of the analogy of the cardiologist. If you go to the cardiologist, what he would come up with that questionnaire, please fill it, and then I will give you the prescription like that. So, Prof, you see people follow you on so much different platform, and they relate everything.
Fantastic.
Yes,
This
Prof.
is actually the example I usually give. You go to a cardiologist, and the
Yes,
cardiologist has to check the mechanics of the heart. And many
true.
times you don't know. I had a friend that a few days ago, he called me and he said, I have myocarditis.
Yeah.
Myocarditis was very related with COVID. And I said, did you feel anything? He says, I didn't feel anything. I went for my periodical and pre-arranged meeting I have with my cardiologist. The same
Yes.
happens with emotions and mental processes. Unfortunately, because we are conscious about some of them, we think that thoughts and feelings do not fall to the same mechanical bodily function as a healthy heart.
Yes.
Absolutely is the same. The
Yeah.
brain, as the heart must be healthy and pump blood and operate well, is the same with the brain. It's just that it works in electrochemical activities, which we try to understand.
Yes, wonderful. And Prof, we have received a wonderful message as well, and a compliment for you that Prof, what you are doing is fantastic, and we follow you all the time. And Prof, it's good that you connect that. How did you develop your interest towards science? But I saw and I saw somewhere that you were talking about the pain, that life starts with the pain, and your fascination also start from the pain. So, Prof, you see again, people are relating the
Wow.
different things. Yeah. And this is the thing that people, when they follow you with the true passion, that because of your contribution, you are doing a so fantastic job, and you convince them that you have an impact on the people and the processes, what you are referring towards the brain processes and the structure. So that's the wonderful part, that you have
Amazing.
already, yeah, already covered this one. And because they asked about that, please ask the Prof regarding the what fascinated him and what are the pulling force towards the neuroscience, because he has a background of the business education. So you have already covered this wonderful question, and I'm sure that since you have been asked so many times this question, so that's why you already address it, so that to make it clear. Prof, one another very interesting question, and I'm sure it carries a lot of importance to remove this misconception, I would say. The question they have sent that, Prof, please enlighten us about the misconception that neuroscience is a manipulation to the brain. Please explain the processes and the protocol of it. That it's not a manipulation. It's what? Yes,
Excellent.
please.
Excellent. It's one of the most important questions. First of all, there is a very strong ethics part in using these technologies and applying results. So as both an academic and a practitioner, we have always to abide to the strictest ethical procedures. I'm not mentioning legal because this is given, but also the ethical. However, I have to say the following. There is a lot of evidence, and it's one of my next planned posts. There is a lot of evidence from many different types of studies that, and we have included this in my first book, Neuroscience for Leaders, with Professor Sakoyos, that we had early signs, and now we have quite strong evidence that if the brain is not already calibrated towards an action, a group of people, or values, you cannot manipulate or brainwash the brain to do it. This is a kind of, unfortunately, I would say wishful thinking, because somebody would like to manipulate people. But both neuroscience and psychology have conducted, and even amazing game theory simulations from big tech companies that have proven that you cannot change the course of a population if this population already does not have the strong seed for the path that you want them to take. So this, again, mind-driven illusion that only by thoughts or by something I will make your mind to follow me is not true. First of all, I'm very happy it's not true, okay? Because if it was true, it would be a very difficult situation, and the safety procedures would be much more. So there was even a study that was released a month ago about social media extremism. And they took a few populations and their exposure to different information in social media, and they found out that if you did not already had an interest towards, let's say, towards a conspiracy theory or an extreme ideology, if you already didn't have the willingness and the attitude to go towards there, no ad or post would make you do it. So there is no manipulation. This kind of urban legend, urban myth that we have for manipulation and brainwashing does not exist. Now, this, I will go back to my first part of this, does not mean that we do not have the ethical responsibility to make sure how we use all technologies, neuroscience included. And I want to ask you something else, because I said one thing and there's a second thing, which is very important. What is the role of marketing? What is the role of marketing? Now, imagine, I will put it as simply as I can. Let's say I'm advising a company to develop a new logo, a new brand name. What is my role as a brand advisor or as a marketing strategist? To ask my design team to develop a logo and then impose it to people? That's stupid. It will take a lot of time. It will never happen. My role is to find three alternatives, to design three alternatives, to show it to people, and to make sure that I choose the one that they believe that they like the most. Now, traditionally, I would do it with a questionnaire. Look at these three logos, and you tell me self-report, the interpreter from Gazanica, self-report which one you like. It's just that with neuromarketing, instead of asking you, I'm asking your brain. So I will do what your brain likes, not what your brain doesn't like. I will not take of the three logos the one that your brain doesn't like, and I will try to manipulate you to like. That doesn't make sense. So actually, what we try to do with neuromarketing is not impose something for the brain that the brain doesn't like. We find what the brain likes, and we give more of that.
Yes, very nice, Prof. Thank you very much for such a elaborative answer. I enjoyed it and loved your answer. And Prof, there is one another interesting question which is somehow related to it, since you are talking about the predictability of that thing. They want to ask that, Prof, please, would you like to explain what is the neuro forecast? What it is based upon? Please elaborate. Yes, please.
Tell me again, I didn't hear you well.
Neuro forecast.
Neuro forecast. Okay. So first of all, this is concerning the applied part of neuroscience. Still, we have not yet completely agreed in terms on terminology, right? Because
Oh,
all this is very much, neuroscience did really big steps from 80s and 90s where new technologies were developed, like fMRI. We didn't have fMRI before. fMRI is a later technology and other technologies. So many of the things are quite new. The discoveries are fascinating, but the technology is new. So there are, for example, the term neuromarketing is not an agreed term. Is neuromarketing about using electroencephalogram when I study an advertisement? Or is it if I come to your company and I say, listen, I do neuromarketing, I will advise you what color to put on your website, not with research, by consulting. What is called behavioral science. Of course, it has its own research, but many behavioral consultants are using theories like biases or nudges or framing or Cialdini's principles of persuasion, and they advise companies how to communicate better. So now we are getting better. We have a term called consumer neuroscience to indicate the neurotech-based research of marketing stimuli, and we call behavioral change or behavioral science the more psychology-based advisory of how to design a customer experience. So we are getting better with this. So, for example, neuroforecasting. Many people in my arena could say neuroforecasting is actually the prediction models we create based on this neurotechnology research fueled with neurotechnology. So if I bring you in front of a laptop, and that's a study that it is published, a study that I very often mention into my audiences, you want to study and to predict which startup will collect more money in a crowdfunding campaign. So there are few crowdfunding campaigns before they are launched. You check with an electroencephalogram the pure reaction of the brain, which one it is engaging with, a liking or disliking. And then based on your algorithms, you predict that these startups will get money and these will not get money. Then the actual campaigns start, and 6 months later, 4 months later, you go and you see which startups collected the money. And you try to see if your prediction model was accurate or not. And in this case, for example, it was about 85%, which is amazing to predict actual behavior in the marketplace or in an economy based on forecast. Of course, I could go on and talk a lot about of how the brain predicts stuff, which is really also fascinating, because our brain is making 1,000 predictions per second. But that's a story of another session with you.
Yes, Prof, because the way you are explaining and the way you are elaborating different things, I'm enjoying. But again, we have the time limitation as well. You are a wonderful narrator, and the way you are explaining the things, I would love to even listen to you for consecutive 15 to 16 hours non-stop because
Hey, this is very dangerous because I like to talk for 15 hours. So this is could be a match made in heaven or in
yeah.
hell. I don't know.
So, if God willing, we can have multiple sessions with you in the future because you are a wonderful,
Thank
I
you so
would say,
much.
narrator. Prof, there is one another very interesting question, and one of our faculty member he wants to ask this question. As an educator, you are yourself are educator, and you are consulting as well. They want to ask that, Prof, how do you see the application and usage of neurotech in education industry in upcoming future? Yes, please.
That's an excellent question also to finish with. So there is strong research showing that neurometric and biometric data, because of course in neuromarketing and consumer neuroscience, we collect many types of data. It's not only electroencephalogram, that it's neurodata, because it's neurometrics. You measure the actual speaking of the neurons, the electricity that it is produced by neurospeaking, groups of neurons and regions of neurospeaking, and the electric waves. And people have heard about brain waves like alpha or beta or theta. But also we collect eye tracking, so movement of eyes, or emotional facial analysis, or emotional voice analysis. Galvanic skin response. Do you remember the sweat that we have when the sympathetic system starts, when we get into arousal and excitation? We measure this, and some others. There is already research that when you use these technologies in class, you can identify when students are more engaged, when the unconscious brain is more engaged, what they like or the brain rejects. Even something that fascinates me lately, it is brain-to-brain synchronization, neural synchronization. When there is somebody speaking as a lecturer or a presenter, it's not only my sensory neurons to engage, so not only to hear what you're saying, but deeper parts of my brain have to synchronize with yours in order to experience the story, to for you to take me with you in the journey of the class. And this creates deeper memory, and more important, there is evidence that when with these technologies, neurometric or biometric, we collect signs that the brain and the body engages, these sections of the lecture, you perform much better in the exams. So we even have evidence, not only that the brain listens more, but it experiences better, deeper, it creates memory. And when you are to carry this knowledge or this skill later on, there is evidence you did. So for me, the classroom of the future will be equipped with these sensors and will be amazing information for us to design educational experiences that have better impact.
Yeah, wow, Prof, very nice. And I'm really enjoying the way you are using the different phrases because that's so wonderful. And I love your previous phrases that the conscious mind is taking the decision, and the sorry, unconscious mind is taking the decision, and the conscious mind is just representing it. Very nicely you have mentioned, and the different phrases I loved while you were just narrating the things. They were so great. Prof,
So
one
just to
last,
say one more thing, because we have reached the end of our time, but I'm very happy to repeat this and
please.
to maybe even in person once we meet and we have these wonderful discussions. But
Yeah.
John Barch is a very famous psychologist, and he is considered one of the leading global experts of studying the unconscious. He
Wow.
always says, unconscious first. Whatever happens, what you do in life, what you say, what you think, how you connect with people, your hopes, your fears, your leadership capacities, what you buy, how you treat your kids, how your kids respond. If you want to be
Okay.
accurate, unconscious first.
Wow.
Conscious comes later, maybe to explain, maybe to connect, maybe to. There are many theories of what conscious is about, since it's not about decision making. What is the value of consciousness, since it's not as traditionally we're thinking? There are a few very interesting theories which we can discuss next time. Thank you so much for having me. It
Yeah.
was really a
Thank you very much.
pleasure. I
Yeah.
really
And
hope
Prof,
that
one
people
last
enjoyed it.
question from you. Quickly question. That's my personal question, and the audiences as well, because they have sent it multiple times from around the globe. They want to know, Prof, what is your source of motivation for doing neuroscience so passionately? Yes, please. Would you like to share your secret, your source of motivation?
Um, maybe we have another 10 hours, but what I will say is that it's amazing in life, and I feel myself very grateful, very, very grateful that life helps me turn my inner sense of purpose and the big pains I feel in life, that through intuition, maybe I listen to my unconscious and I help my unconscious to make it happen. So I think that when people try to do things in life because they like them, it will not last long. It's when you do things because you don't have a choice. Of course, you have a choice. What I mean is that you feel this so much internal urge that
Yes.
if you say no to it, I
True.
think this will become problematic very fast in life. And we talked about burnout, anxiety, depression, and all these things. You need to find, and David Hume, this very famous Scottish philosopher, he used to say, don't come to me to find your passion. This is something you need to discover deep inside you. Come to me to help you make it a reality. That's actually the difference between unconscious and
Wow.
conscious. Unconscious is the big passion, the fire in life. Use conscious as something that will help you better apply it.
Yes, very nice, Prof. And the way you are talking about the different philosopher and the philosophy, because you have a background from the Greek philosophy, and this is the inclination as well. And
Yes.
Prof, that could be the inner calling as well. And we usually say that if you do not drain out of your energy, it means your passion. And sometimes we call it that if you don't like to sleep because you want to work more, that would be referred as your passion. So, Prof, really, I enjoyed this session with you. Thank you very much for such a elaborative discussion, and I would say you have covered so much things in this small time, and I would say it was so wonderful. At the end, Prof, what is your message to the world as a speaker, author, teacher, trainer, learner, professional, and educator? Yes, please.
Thank you so much. All the best to you personally and all the wonderful
Thank,
work you do to bring people from all around the world to reach the
thank
audiences that you have. I think this is also your calling, and you're doing amazingly well in this. And to thank you
thank,
everybody that was here. Please connect with me if you want through LinkedIn, and to continue this conversation. Thank you so much. Take care of your brains and take care of the brains of the people you love the most.
Wow, wonderful. Please follow our distinguished guest speaker. The description, you can find him, his linked in the link, and you can contact him for future learning at Guinness. He is very generous and always ready to help the people. So that's all we have time for today. Thank you once again, Dr. Nikolaos Dimitriadis. And I would like to thank our audience who joined us. If you have any additional question about information shared today, please email or connect to the speaker directly. That's all. Thank you all for your support and liking our session. Stay tuned as many sessions are on the way. Please do not miss any session. Until next session, take care of yourself. Bye bye.